Welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. Before we begin, you may want to dim the lights. Pull a blanket up to your chin, and maybe switch on a fan so that soft background hum keeps you company. This is Epic Boring History for Sleep the Channel, where history is delivered as gently as possible, with a dash of dry humor. If you enjoy this sort of thing, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to. And we'd love to know where you're listening from, and what time it is there. Now, let's step back into the 19th century. You find yourself standing before the looming walls of a Victorian workhouse. The sort of place whispered about in Dickensian tones. You didn't come here for pleasure if you ever did. But since you're here, let's walk through those heavy doors together. You arrive at the edge of town, and there it is, the workhouse. No need for a sign. The building introduces itself without words. Tall, flat walls of red brick, squared corners as sharp as a ledger's edge, and rows of narrow windows that seem less interested in letting light out than in keeping souls in. If you came here expecting an inviting cottage with lace curtains and a friendly gate, you might want to reset your imagination. This place was designed with one main idea: seriousness. The Victorian seriousness didn't dabble in whimsy. As you step closer, the air carries its own introduction. Coal smoke lingers heavily, blown in from tall chimneys that exhale all day and all night. The scent is joined by something subtler, but unmistakable: the watery temps of boiled cabbage. It seeps into the cobbled courtyard, clinging to your clothes before you've even stepped through the front door. Think of it as a welcome gift you didn't ask for, and certainly can't return. The ground beneath your shoes is uneven, slick with a dampness that never quite leaves. Your footsteps echo between the high brick walls, creating a hollow sound that makes you suddenly aware of just how alone you are. People pass by, eyes turned downward, their expressions flat as if to say, "Yes, we've all been here." Best not to make it worse by smiling. If you had any lingering sense that this was a place of comfort, the atmosphere politely but firmly corrects you. The entrance itself is plain, even forbidding. A heavy wooden door reinforced with iron bands, the kind of door that suggests more about keeping people in than welcoming them out. Bell clangs faintly in the distance, though you're not sure whether it's signaling mealtime, work duty, or simply a reminder that time belongs to the institution now. Whatever it means, the message is clear. Inside, life runs to rhythms you didn't set. Crossing the threshold feels like stepping into a different climate altogether. The air is cooler, tinged with lime wash and damp stone. Sounds bounce differently here, sharper, as if even whispers are required to sound disciplined. Somewhere down the corridor, a boot heel strikes against flagstones, quick and decisive. Paper rustles, keys, jingle. It's a soundtrack of authority, and you're only the newest player. You notice the walls are stark, stripped of decoration. No paintings, no wallpaper, not even a half-hearted fern to suggest softness. Just plain plaster that seems to scold you for even hoping. The Victorians believed architecture itself should teach lessons, and this lesson is loud and clear: thrift, order, and absolutely no unnecessary comfort. Think of it as the world's most depressing motivational poster, but in brick and mortar. Every detail reinforces that you are not a guest, you are an inmate. That's the actual term, though, less friendly than resident. Guests are offered tea. Inmates are offered porridge and an iron bedstead. Guests can leave. Inmates, not so much. The building's not hostile. Exactly, it won't shout at you. It does something quieter, and perhaps more unsettling. It erases you, folding you into its system the way paper slips into a filing cabinet. Neat, efficient, anonymous. The sound of doors opening and closing in the distance reminds you that this place is full of people, yet you don't see them immediately. The design of the workhouse ensures that groups remain separate. Paths carefully channeled so that life inside feels controlled, segmented, and properly supervised. It's like a human warehouse, and the aisles are arranged by age and gender. Families are not families, here they're categories. Outside, the world may still carry traces of individuality, faces you recognize. Neighbors you nod to, streets filled with noise and barter. But in here, the tone changes entirely. No matter who you were, the workhouse greets you with the same message: strip down, start over, and fit in. You feel the weight of the door close behind you, the iron latch clicking with a kind of finality that rings louder than it should. For a moment, you might think about turning back, but then you realize that was never really an option. Once you've crossed the threshold, you're part of the system. And yet even as you stand there, taking in the stark hallways and the smell of smoke and cabbage, there's a strange comfort in the predictability. It's not designed to be kind, but it is designed to be certain. Here you will always know when the bell rings, where to sit, what to wear, and even what to eat. Routine may not be pleasant, but it is reliable. And for many who came here, reliability was more than they had outside. Your eyes wander to the small wooden bench in the entrance hall, worn smooth by years of anxious visitors waiting for instructions. You can almost feel the grooves of countless hands running nervously over its edges, the wood absorbing the uncertainty of generations. You sit, and for a moment, the bench seems to whisper. Everyone who has entered has felt the same unease. You are not alone in this discomfort. But comfort is fleeting, because soon enough, footsteps approach. A figure in uniform beckons, a set of keys jingling with every step. Your introduction to the workhouse is far from over. The building has sized you up. Now it's time for the system to file you into your place, so the first sight gives way to the first ritual. Admission. The door to the next room creaks open, and you're told to step through. 8 is here, in this plain chamber, that your outside life will be stripped awake, white, literally. The bench beneath you barely has time to grow warm before the orderly waves you forward. You follow boots echoing against flagstone and step into a smaller chamber. The air here feels different, colder, sharper, as if the very walls are keen to remind you of your new status. This is the admission room, the threshold between your old life and whatever this regimented existence will become. The first thing you notice is the ledger. It sits upon a desk as large as a coffin, its pages thick with names, ages, conditions, and the kind of tidy Victorian handwriting that managed to make even human despair look neat. The clerk doesn't look up much. Their quill scratches steadily, as though you're just another line to be filled in. Another number in the ever-growing tally of the poor. You tell them your name, and it disappears into ink. The quill doesn't pause, doesn't tremble, doesn't ask for your story. Just scratch, scratch, scratch. Then comes the matter of your possessions. A small basket is pushed toward you, and you're instructed to hand over everything. Clothes, boots, scarf, perhaps the lucky trinket you kept in your pocket. Nothing is exempt. The logic is clear. Uniformity. Everyone inside these walls is meant to look alike, stripped of status and personal history. If you arrived wearing a coat carefully darned by your mother, or a cap passed down from your father, it doesn't matter. Into the basket it goes, disappearing into the institution's store. The smell of soap lingers in this room, though not the lavender or rosewater variety. This is harsh, industrial soap, the kind that burns the skin more than it soothes. Nearby, a bucket of delousing powder stands ready, its chalky scent hanging faint in the air. The implication is clear. Whatever the outside world has sent in fleas, lice, or stubborn individuality will be scrubbed away. Congratulations, your memories are about to get washed alongside your old trousers. Now comes the uniform. It is not flattering. Coarse cotton or wool, dyed in shades that can only be described as disappointing brown or unenthusiastic gray. For men, the cut is plain and sack-like. For women, equally shapeless. It is clothing designed not to fit you, but to erase you. No ribbons, no lace, no fashionable cuts. The workhouse did not believe in fashion, it believed in efficiency. And in making sure that everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest pensioner, could be identified at a glance as belonging here, sliding into the uniform, you feel its texture immediately. Scratchy, stiff, unforgiving. The seams rub at the wrong places. It doesn't hug your body so much as hang off it like an accusation. Even your boots are swapped for heavy, clunky versions that sound louder than your own steps. You realize you've become a walking echo in this place. There's a strange moment, though, when you catch sight of others also newly admitted. You see them in their identical clothing, hair freshly cut, faces scrubbed raw. And suddenly, you understand the purpose. Individuality has been filed away. Everyone here has been sanded down to the same surface, the same texture. Family, career, dignity, those were outside world concepts. Inside, you are just one more body in uniform, folded into the ledger's ink. The physical stripping away isn't only about hygiene or order, it's symbolic. Victorian society liked symbols, and here the message couldn't be louder. Poverty, they believed, was not only a condition but a moral weakness. The workhouse, therefore, had to cure not just your hunger, but your habits. And the first cure was humility. Nothing humbles quite like standing in a bare room, your worldly belongings gone, wearing scratchy cloth that fits everyone and no one. Yet despite the humiliation, there is a peculiar relief. Outside, your clothes marked threadbare coats, patched boots, the obvious signs of desperation. Inside, everyone looks the same. The wealthy visitor peeking in through the gates can no longer tell your story by your attire. You are anonymous. That anonymity might sting, but it also shields. At least here you are not judged by the tatters of what you once wore. You stand now, fully dressed in institutional gray, feeling both diminished and oddly untethered. The basket with your old clothes is carried away, and you wonder if you'll ever see them again. Spoiler, probably not. Somewhere down the line, they'll be laundered, repaired, and passed to someone else, stripped of their memory of you. As the orderly nods, you're ushered through another door, deeper into the labyrinth. You know what you've left behind? Your possessions, your individuality, your outside identity. What you don't yet know is where you're going. But the echo of footsteps in the corridor suggests the answer lies in the next hall, where men are separated from women and children from parents. The corridor widens, and the orderly gestures with a practiced motion, sending you toward a heavy door. The hinges complain as it swings open, and suddenly you re-in the men's wardrobe. If you happen to be a woman in this little journey, imagine the same scene simply on the other side of a separating wall. The principle is identical. Segregation first, comfort never. The dormitory is vast, yet feels strangely compressed. Iron bedsteads line the room in strict rows, each spaced just enough apart to prevent complaints, but never enough to grant privacy. It is the Victorian answer to efficiency. Maximize bodies, minimize individuality. Each bed comes with a straw mattress, flattened by countless sleepers before you. The fabric cover is coarse, and when you press a hand down, it crunches faintly, a sound that makes you wonder what else might be rustling inside. Congratulations, your new bed now comes with the occasional complimentary flea. The air is a peculiar mix. Lime wash from the walls, lingering disinfectant, and the unmistakable scent of human habitation. You breathe it in and know instantly that fresh air will be a rare treat. The windows are high and narrow, letting in light but no breeze. Of course, they are placed too far up to tempt anyone with thoughts of escape. These are not windows designed to be looked through, but windows designed to remind you that the world is out there and you are not. You notice the silence is not complete. There's the constant undercurrent of sounds, someone coughing in a corner, the wheeze of lungs damaged by years of factory soot, the shuffling of feet on bare boards. At night, you will add your own noises to the chorus, whether you like it or not. Snores will mix with muttered dreams, and occasionally the sharp groan of a bed frame when someone turns too quickly. It's a kind of orchestra, though perhaps not one you'd ever buy a ticket to hear. The men's and women's wards were mirror images in principle. For men, the day ahead was filled with stone breaking, oakum picking, or other hard labor. For women, it was washing, mending, and cooking tasks, endless in their repetition, yet deemed appropriate for moral improvement. Children had their own quarters, tucked away separately, to remind everyone that even family ties were subordinate to institutional order. You may have walked in as a father, mother, son, or daughter, but once the doors closed behind you, you are simply a ward inmate, filed into categories as firmly as clothes into drawers. As you stand by your assigned bed, the orderly points out the rules. No talking after lights out. The beds must be made each morning with corners sharp enough to impress the governor during inspection. Any complaints about food, about conditions, about the sheer monotony of life are best swallowed. The building does not appreciate backtalk, and neither do those in charge. Still, the wards carry their own peculiar rhythms. In the evenings, before the lamps are extinguished, there are whispered conversations, snippets of old lives, fragments of hope, sometimes even small jokes passed along the rows. Laughter is quiet, brief, and carefully hidden, but it exists. Even in a place designed to erase individuality, people cling to fragments of themselves. The blankets on your bed are rough wool, scratchy against your skin. They smell faintly of dampness, as if they never quite dried after washing. In winter, they will be too thin to keep the cold entirely away, and in summer, they will trap heat uncomfortably. But they are what you have, and soon you realize that gratitude in the workhouse is measured differently. A blanket, however scratchy, is still something. A bed, however lumpy, is still a surface to sleep on. And when exhaustion is your constant companion, you learn not to be picky. Standing there adjusting to the space, you begin to notice the rhythm of movement. Warders pacing steadily, boots clicking against boards, other inmates arranging their straw pallets, their gestures practiced and resigned. There's no sense of home here, but there is a sense of order, and order is the institution's favorite virtue. Your first night here will not be restful. Every cough will wake you, every snore will remind you that privacy is a memory. But eventually, weariness will win. And in the morning, you'll rise when the bell demands, shuffle into the hall with the rest, and follow the flow toward the next part of life inside the workhouse. The bell tolls, and you rise because everyone rises. The air in the ward is heavy with the mingled scents of stale straw, unwashed fabric, and the faint temps of lime wash. You rub the sleep from your eyes, such as it was, and join the shuffle of feet toward the dining hall. It is less a walk than a slow, resigned drift-an, entire room of bodies funneling into a corridor, guided not by choice, but by the steady insistence of routine. The dining hall greets you with its own particular aroma. Imagine boiled oats, multiplied by 100 bowls, all ladled out in rapid succession. The smell is not offensive exactly, but neither is it appetizing. It's the sort of smell that makes you think of damp mornings, wet wood, and that time someone forgot porridge on the stove, and it turned into a chewy brick. You are handed your portion in a tin bowl, accompanied by a tin spoon. The bowl is warm in your hands, its rim slightly rough from years of use. You look down at your meal, and what greets you is a grayish mass that slumps more than it sits. This is porridge stripped of luxury, no milk. No sugar, no butter, no raisins, not even the faintest pinch of spice. It is oats, water, and the faint seasoning of institutional despair. You find your place at one of the long wooden tables, shoulder to shoulder with others. The room is lined with rows like a military mess, but without the camaraderie. Conversation is minimal. Workhouse dining is not designed for lingering. It is about fueling the body in the most basic sense, before labor calls. Talking is discouraged, sometimes outright forbidden. So instead of chatter, the room is filled with the sounds of spoons, scraping tin, the occasional cough, and the faint creak of benches as people shift uncomfortably. You raise a spoonful and taste. The porridge clings heavily, coating your mouth with blandness. It is warm at least, and warmth counts for something in a place where the world often feels cold, but it offers little satisfaction. You swallow and find yourself chewing more out of habit than necessity. Congratulations, you've discovered that texture can be a form of entertainment. Occasionally, if you are lucky or unlucky, depending on your perspective, there may be a small lump of unsoftened oat that gives a brief crunch, an unexpected event in the otherwise endless plain of mush. It is, you realize, the Victorian equivalent of a surprise prize in a cereal box, except this one does not come with joy. Across the room, you see children with smaller portions, their legs dangling off benches too tall for them. They eat with quick, anxious motions, as though speed might transform the taste. For the elderly, the process is slower, spoons shaking slightly, porridge dribbling back into bowls. The meal reflects the entire institution, a leveling mechanism reducing everyone to the same ritual, no matter age or past. The walls of the dining hall are bare, except for the constant reminder of order. Instructions posted in firm lettering, warnings about silence and cleanliness. You might look up at the ceiling beams following their darkened grain. Anything to keep your mind occupied while your body goes through the motions of eating. Time itself seems to thicken here, stretched by the monotony of breakfast. Eventually bowls are emptied, or at least scraped down to what can pass as empty. You rise when told, place your bowl in the collection area, and rejoin the slow current of movement. The meal is over, not remembered with pleasure, but simply endured. And yet, despite its lack of flavor, breakfast has done its job. You feel the faint heaviness in your stomach, the kind that signals you'll have the energy to push, pull, hammer, or wash for several more hours. And so you shuffle back into the corridor where the smell of porridge lingers faintly in your clothes. Ahead lies the true purpose of your stave, the labor that defines the day. Because here, survival is measured not in comfort, but in work. And work is exactly where you're headed next. The first thing you notice is not light, but sound. A sharp clang, metallic and insistent, slices through the air of the ward. The morning bell. It rings not once, but again and again, as though repetition might shake even the heaviest sleeper from their straw mattress. In truth, it's less a bell and more a brass declaration that your day is not your own. The sound carries differently, depending on where you are. In the men's ward, it rattles through the high rafters, bouncing off bare plaster walls, until it becomes a kind of metallic echo chamber. In the women's ward, the noise weaves its way through rows of beds, jostling mothers, daughters, and grandmothers alike into reluctant wakefulness. And for the children, it is the same bell that dictates everything: when to sleep, when to wake, when to move. Childhood here is rung in brass notes, not in play. You sit up, adjusting to the chill. Victorian mornings in a workhouse are not known for their coziness. The air feels damp, as though the walls themselves have soaked up the night and now breathe it back at you. Your blanket thin, scratchy slides down your shoulders, and the cold moves in like an uninvited guest. There are no alarm clocks, no snooze buttons, no whispered promise of just 5 more minutes, only the bell and the slow shuffle of dozens of others answering its command. The ward is suddenly alive with sound, coughs, rustling blankets, the scrape of bed frames as people swing their legs down. The rhythm is unhurried, but steady, like a tide that cannot be resisted. You glance around and see faces in the half-light, some resigned, some still dazed with sleep, a few already hardened into expressions of habitual endurance. No one fights the bell. The bell always wins. Dressing is quick, because there is little to put on. You gather your workhouse uniform, stiff from yesterday's wear, and pull it over your head. The coarse fabric scratches as it settles against your skin. A few people mutter under their breath about the cold, but nothing more. Complaints, like everything else here, have no place to linger. As you join the line filing toward the day's beginning, you realize the bell is more than sound, it is structure. It divides the endlessness of workhouse life into segments. Without it, the days might blur into a fog of porridge and labor. With it, there is at least a rhythm, however rigid. You may not like the rhythm, but you know its beat. And so, the bell fades into silence, leaving its command behind. You step out into the corridor, the chill of the flagstones pressing through thin soles, the air sharp in your lungs. Breakfast has been endured, the bell has rung, and now the day must unfold. Ahead lies labor, and with it, the peculiar soundtrack of the workhouse. Clinks, scrapes, and the ceaseless hum of human effort, which leads you to the yard and to your task, the labor waiting just beyond the door. If the wards and corridors of the workhouse are cold and clammy, the laundry and kitchen are their fiery opposites. When you step through the heavy door into these rooms, it is like walking into the lungs of the building. The air itself feels alive, thick, wet, and pressing against your skin in a way that makes you sweat before you've even lifted a finger. The laundry greets you first. Vast cauldrons bubble like oversized witches' pots, only instead of strange brews, they are filled with sheets, uniforms, and rags stewing in water gone gray with grime. The steam rolls upward in great ghostly curls, blurring faces and dripping condensation down the walls. You grip a wooden paddle, its handle swollen from years of soaking and stir. The smell is a cocktail of damp linen, soap, and human effort, cleanliness in progress, though not yet achieved. Your clothes stick to your back within minutes. The heat isn't gentle. It clings like a damp embrace, seeping into your pores until even breathing feels heavy. A cough erupts, nearby steam thickens the air, and lungs sometimes protest. You wonder briefly if this is what it feels like to live inside a teapot. Congratulations, you are now both washer and steam ingredient. From laundry, the line of labor often flows directly into the kitchen. If the laundry is humid, the kitchen is dry and scorching. Here fires blaze beneath iron pots, so large you could mistake them for cauldrons of myth. They simmer endlessly with porridge, potatoes, or soup, always in bulk, never in variety. The air is heavy with the earthy scent of boiled vegetables and grains. You might be set to peel potatoes, the skins dropping in wet curls onto a growing pile at your feet. Or you might stir a massive pot with a wooden spoon that feels more like an oar. The heat blasts against your face, your cheeks flushed red, your forehead slick with sweat. The fires roar and the pots hiss, a duet of flame and steam that fills the entire room. For a moment, you catch yourself drifting, lulled by the rhythm, the scrape of knife against potato, the bubbling boil, the steady shuffle of feet. It is almost hypnotic, though never relaxing. Your muscles ache, your back complains, but still, you continue. Because that is the unspoken rule here: stop, and the workhouse notices. The workhouse never approves. The smell of the kitchen clings to you just as much as the heat does. By the time you leave, your hair will carry the scent of cabbage and starch, and your skin will feel slick with the residue of the fire's breath. Stepping back into the corridors afterward feels almost refreshing, the cool, damp air a shock after the furnace-like haze. And yet the laundry and kitchen are strangely central. They sustain the rhythm of the whole building: clean clothes, simple meals, the practical fabric of survival. Without them, the workhouse would falter. Inside their heat, you glimpse the quiet truth. Behind every institution, someone is always stirring the pot. But there are other tasks waiting too, ones less steamy, yet no less punishing. Step outside the kitchen door, and you'll find yourself in the yard, staring at stones meant not for walking but for breaking. After the heat of the laundry and the roar of the kitchen fires, the chapel feels like stepping into a different kind of atmosphere, quieter and heavy, with a different weight. You pass through a narrow doorway, your footsteps muffled by worn stone. The air here is still, as though it has been waiting for you, layered with faint traces of candle wax, damp wood, and dust that seems older than you can measure. The chapel is plain. Forget stained glass blazing with saints or ceilings painted like the heavens. This is a workhouse, and beauty has been deliberately economized. The windows are tall but unadorned, letting in a gray light that washes over rows of simple benches. The pulpit stands at the front, elevated just enough to remind you that sermons, like rules, flow only one way. Scripture boards hang on the walls, painted with verses chosen for their moral gravity, emphasizing obedience, humility, and the dignity of labor. Subtle encouragements to accept your lot, neatly brushed in black paint. You file in with others, men to one side, women to the other, children arranged separately so no group forgets its order. The sound of shoes scuffing against stone echoes softly as everyone takes their places. There's no chatter. The silence is part of the ritual. The benches are hard and narrow, encouraging upright posture rather than comfort. You sit, feeling the wood press into your back, and fold your hands because everyone else does. When the service begins, the chaplain's voice fills the space. It is steady, practiced, and edged with the authority of someone who knows his role is both spiritual and disciplinary. He reads passages about patience, about endurance, about finding purpose even in suffering. You listen. Because listening is expected, though your mind drifts now and then to the thought of porridge, laundry, steam, or stones waiting in the yard. The hymns are sung without instruments, voices rising together in plain melody. The sound is raw, almost stark, dozens of voices untrained, carried more by duty than joy. Yet there is something oddly moving about it. A song, however imperfect, is still a shared breath, a reminder that you are part of a collective rhythm, if not a collective freedom. You glance around and notice faces softened by the act of singing. For some, the chapel offers a rare pause from toil, a moment to sit still without paddles, stones, or potatoes in hand. For others, it is a reminder that even worship here is regimented, timed, and watched. You may find your own thoughts flickering between the two, feelings comfort and constraint like the light, filtering through the plain windows. When the service ends, the silence lingers for a moment, as though the walls themselves are reluctant to let it go. Then the shuffle begins again, benches creaking, boots scuffing, the order of separation reinstated. Men, women, and children peel away into their designated paths, returning to the work that always waits. As you step back into the corridor, you realize the chapel is not just about faith, it is about order. It reminds you that even prayer is rationed, portioned, and kept under the same rules as food or clothing. And outside its walls, the rest of the day stretches ahead, filled with the unending work of survival. If the chapel is meant to soothe the soul, the infirmary is where bodies are deposited when they finally protest against the rhythm of the workhouse. You arrive here not by choice, but by necessity when your cough grows too heavy, when your joints lock up, or when the steam from the laundry or dust from the stone yard has taken too much out of you. The infirmary is not a place of healing so much as a pause button, a holding chamber between labor and the inevitable. The smell reaches you first, a mixture of carbolic disinfectant, boiled linen, and the inescapable temps, sickness. It is sharper than the laundry, heavier than the kitchen, and tinged with something human you'd rather not define. The walls are whitewashed, their cleanliness more symbolic than effective, and the beds are narrow iron frames lined up in obedient rows. Each holds a thin mattress, its ticking fabric stretched over straw or horsehair, and a single wool blanket folded at the foot. You lie down because you must, the springs groaning faintly under your weight. Around you, the air is punctuated by coughs, sneezes, and the murmured prayers of the very old. The windows are tall but often shut tight against the cold, so the room feels stuffy, the air trapped and stale. The light that filters through is gray, softening faces into tired masks. The nurse on duty, if you can call her, that moves between beds with a utilitarian air. She is brisk, her skirt swishing as she walks, her hands red from constant scrubbing. Treatments are simple, sometimes laughably so. Tonic here, a poultice there, perhaps a spoonful of cod liver oil if you look particularly wan. If you have fever, you are told to rest. If your chest rattles with phlegm, you are given broth. Surgery, advanced remedies, or comfort are not part of the package. The infirmary deals in the basics. Survive if you can, endure if you must. Children end up here too, their small forms swallowed by iron beds. They cry less than you expect, not because they are brave, but because the workhouse has taught them silence. Old men and women linger in the far rows, their eyes half closed, their breathing shallow. You realize quickly that the infirmary is both hospital and waiting room for death, and the line between the two can be alarmingly thin. Yet even here, the routine remains. Meals arrive at the same time, thin broths, weak tea, the occasional crust of bread softened in liquid so the ill can manage it. Bells still dictate the schedule, though you are spared the yard's labor. Your work is to recover, though recover is defined generously. A slight reduction in coughing may count as success. Lying back, you listen to the chorus of the room, the creak of iron frames, the rustle of blankets, the hollow echo of footsteps across stone. You may drift into sleep, not because you feel better, but because exhaustion does what tonics cannot. In that sleep, the line between being a patient and simply another silent body begins to blur. When you finally rise, whether after a day or a week, you shuffle back out into the main current of workhouse life. The infirmary, for all its sharp smells and hushed tones, has simply been another chamber of the same institution. And outside its door, waiting faithfully, are the tasks that define the living. The stones in the yard are not getting any smaller, after all. If the infirmary is where bodies collapse, the children's ward is where lives are shaped before they even have the chance to unfold. You notice them everywhere. Small hands clutching tin bowls, small feet dangling from benches too tall for them, small eyes trying very hard not to look too hopeful. Childhood here is not a season of play. It is a regimen measured in porridge portions and work assignments. The youngest children are often separated from their parents as soon as they enter. It's said to be for efficiency, but in practice, it is a kind of pruning cutting family ties, so the institution can graft children directly onto its own rhythm. Boys are sent one way, girls another, mothers and fathers, to their respective wards. The result is that siblings might grow up within the same walls, yet glimpse each other only at mealtimes or on Sunday chapel benches. The sound of the morning bell, which dictates everything, is as much their parent as anyone. Their tasks start small. The older ones learn to pick Okamon raveling coarse ship rope into threads until their fingers are sore and raw. It is work that is deliberately mind-numbing, designed to keep bodies occupied without raising spirits. Some children are sent to scrub floors, others to carry water, others still to sort laundry or help in the kitchens, peeling potatoes until their hands wrinkle from starch and steam. And when school hours arrive, because yes, there is schooling, it is bare-bones instruction. Reading, writing, arithmetic. Enough to make them functional, never enough to encourage dreams. You catch sight of a group of them huddled together in the yard. Their uniforms are like yours, only smaller, sleeves frayed, collars askew. They move as children always do, darting glances, exchanging whispers, when the beetle's back is turned. Even in a workhouse, mischief survives. A boy flicks a bit of oakum fluff at his friend. A girl hides half a crust of bread up her sleeve for later. Their laughter, quick and suppressed, is startling in this place, like a bird flying through a room you'd thought sealed shut. And yet, you cannot miss the weariness in them. Many look older than they are, their faces drawn from routines that grind down even the young. Their skin may be pale from long hours indoors, their eyes shadowed by thin sleep. Some have already learned the art of keeping their heads down, their voices quiet, their steps obedient. Childhood resilience battles daily with the workhouse's dull hammer of repetition. The institution tells itself it is saving them, teaching discipline, instilling habits that will serve them later in life, and to a degree, it is true. Many children leave with skills in cooking, cleaning, sewing, or carpentry. But the cost is evident in the way they sit at mealtimes, hunched and silent, like adults shrunk down into smaller frames. Their games are fleeting, their laughter rationed. Still, there is a strange tenderness when you notice the older ones looking after the younger, tying a shoe, offering a spoonful of porridge, or whispering reassurances in the night. These small acts of rebellion, kindness where none is required, stand out more brightly against the bare backdrop of the workhouse. The institution may separate families, but children have a way of building new ones. When the bell rings again, they scatter into their tasks, the brief spark of play extinguished until the next rare moment. Watching them vanish into the corridors, you realize that the workhouse does not erase childhood entirely. It bends it, molds it, sometimes warps it, but it cannot quite snuff it out. A giggle, a crumb of bread saved, a game of tag played in whispers. These are the cracks through which light still seeps. And yet for the adults, those same corridors lead elsewhere to the heavier labor that defines their days. Soon enough, your own path takes you out into the yard, where waiting for you are piles of stone and a hammer with your name on it. If the stones in the yard weigh on your back, the rules of the workhouse weigh on your mind. They are everywhere posted on walls, spoken in clipped tones, enforced with a vigilance that feels more mechanical than human. You cannot walk the corridors, sit in the hall, or lay your head on your straw mattress without brushing against some invisible wire of regulation. The rules are the skeleton of the place, keeping it upright, but also ensuring no one inside forgets who holds the power. The first and loudest rule is silence. Conversation is discouraged at meals, in the chapel, even during work. Words are rationed more strictly than porridge. A murmur at the wrong moment can earn you a stern look, a note in the ledger, or, if repeated, a punishment. The philosophy is simple. Silence prevents rebellion. Or, more charitably, silence allows reflection. Either way, it is enforced. You learn to communicate with glances, with the shuffle of a foot, with the quiet sharing of a crust hidden in your palm. Next is separation. Men, women, children, each must live, eat, and labor apart. Families who enter together are carefully divided, as though the workhouse fears the strength of bonds more than it fears hunger or disease. A father might catch a glimpse of his son across a courtyard. A mother might glimpse her daughter in chapel, but prolonged togetherness is forbidden. It is not cruelty for cruelty's sake, at least not officially. It's framed as efficiency, as moral hygiene. It's a way of preventing dependency. Yet to you, it feels like loneliness made into a policy. Then there is labor itself. The rule is simple. If you are here, you work. Work is both punishment and cure, both discipline and salvation. Refuse to pick oakum, and you may find yourself in the punishment cell, like too much at stone breaking, and you risk a reduction in rations. Productivity is measured not in results but in obedience. It hardly matters if the stones are never needed, if the rope fibers serve no purpose. The act of labor is its own justification. And woven through all of this are smaller rules, the kind that prick at your patience. Uniforms must be worn at all times. Beds must be made with exact folds. No outside food may be brought in, no gifts exchanged, no personal possessions kept without inspection. You are not an individual in the workhouse. You are a moving part in a machine regulated down to the angle of your blanket's corner. Punishments range from the symbolic to the severe. A missed curfew might bring a lecture and public shaming. A repeated infraction might mean reduced meals or isolation in a bare cell, with only bread and water. For the children, a cane across the palms is not unheard of. For adults, the real sting lies in being marked as disobedient, a word that follows you into every corridor, limiting your chances of leniency. And yet, you find ways to adapt. You measure your words carefully, timing them like contraband. You adjust your movements to match the rhythm of the institution, blending in so that watchful eyes slide past you. Even in discipline, there are cracks. The matron cannot be everywhere at once. The master may not notice a quick handoff of food. The rulebook is a wall, but walls always have shadows to hide in. Still, you cannot forget that the rules shape everything you do, from when you wake to how you hold your spoon. They flatten your days into identical squares like laundry pressed too firmly. And yet, like laundry, some wrinkles remain. A whispered joke, a stolen glance, a tiny rebellion. These are the creases that remind you you're still human beneath the uniform. And once the rules are absorbed, once the silence is swallowed, the workhouse expects more from you. Not only obedience, but the steady churn of labor. The clink of hammer on stone, the hiss of rope fibers unraveling, the scrape of brushes on endless floors. Because after discipline comes the real business of survival work without end. Meals in the workhouse arrive not with joy, but with inevitability, as steady and unremarkable as the turning of a clock. After the clang of the morning bell, after the yard, after whatever task has been deemed suitably punishing for your particular group, you are shepherded once again into the dining hall. It feels less like being invited to eat and more like being processed, another step in the daily machinery. The room is familiar by now. Long benches, bare walls, a faint haze of steam and starch clinging to the air. You sit where you are told, tin bowl in hand, and wait for your portion. The kitchen staff, flushed and sweaty from the furnace behind their work, move briskly down the lines with ladles. Each scoop is measured not by generosity, but by calculation. There must be enough for everyone, and exactly no more. Today's meal is soup, or something claiming the title. It arrives as a pale broth flecked with floating scraps of vegetables, peelings a sliver of carrot, the occasional pea if fortune smiles. If meat is present, it exists only as a whisper, a trace of flavor boiled out of some tough joint hours ago. You raise your spoon, tilt it, and watch the watery liquid slide back, offering warmth but little else. Still, you eat. Everyone does. Hunger sharpens your patience, and even the thinnest broth carries a kind of comfort. The warmth spreads through your chest, the steam fogging your face for a moment. You chew on a softened crust of bread, its edges tough, its middle spongy from being dunked. Conversation remains hushed. Discipline lingers even at mealtime. Only the sounds of spoons, scraping bowls, and the occasional cough fill the air. The routine repeats itself with a strange finality. Breakfast, dinner, supper variations on porridge, broth, bread, and sometimes potatoes. Learn to stop expecting variety, to stop hoping for flavor. Instead, you focus on the fact that it is food, that it fills the space inside your stomach, just enough to keep you moving through the next shift of labor. Porridge in the morning, soup at noon, bread in the evening, again and again and again. Children sometimes peer into their bowls with a mixture of disappointment and resignation. The elderly chew slowly, taking small sips as though prolonging the ritual. You too find yourself slowing down, scraping the bottom of the bowl, as if persistence might uncover something more. It never does. The truth of workhouse food is this: it sustains life without indulging it. It is survival in its thinnest broth. And yet, there is a peculiar solidarity in the act of eating together. The bowls may be bland, but they are shared. For a few minutes, everyone, men, women, children, the strong, The frail sits in the same posture, bent over the same unremarkable meal. Hunger levels hierarchies, even if only for the span of a bowl of soup. When the bowls are cleared and the benches creak as bodies rise, you feel not nourished, exactly, but prepared. Prepared to return to labor, to endure until the next bell, to line up again for the next repetition. Meals here are not milestones but markers, dividing the endless days into smaller, more manageable stretches. And as you step out of the hall, the faint taste of broth still lingering on your tongue, you know what waits? Work never pauses for long, and in the workhouse, labor is always ready to reclaim you. The stones in the yard, the rope in the workshop, the endless cycle of tasks, all of it hums in the distance, waiting for your hands. The workhouse does not deal in surprises. It deals in patterns, in schedules that stretch across the days like long gray ribbons. From the moment you wake to the clang of the morning bell until you shuffle back into your narrow bed, your hours are parceled out with mechanical precision. At first, this precision feels oppressive. Over time, it simply becomes the air you breathe, the water you swim in. You rise when told, eat when told, work when told. Meals arrive at the same times each day, and you can predict the exact moment a ladle will splash into your bowl. The yard fills and empties according to the bell. The chapel gathers and dismisses with solemn regularity. Even illness, even the infirmary, is part of the rhythm and alternate stanza in the same poem. There is a kind of dull comfort in this monotony. You stop asking what comes next, because you already know. Breakfast is porridge, dinner is broth, supper is bread. The work is heavy in the morning, heavier still in the afternoon, lighter only when your body is too tired to notice. Bells mark the transitions with unfeeling clarity. The sound carries across stone and iron, echoing in your bones until you no longer distinguish it from your own heartbeat. At first, you may count the hours, wishing them away. Eventually you stop. Hours become indistinguishable. One day blends into another until time itself feels soft around the edges. You measure not in minutes or hours, but in repetitions. How many times you have lifted the hammer. How many stones you have cracked. How many spoons you have dipped into bowls of porridge. The workhouse is, in its own way, an endless loop. Yet within that loop, small details begin to matter. You notice the way sunlight creeps through a high window at precisely the same angle each morning, slanting across the yard like a ruler. You notice the scrape of wooden benches on stone floors at mealtimes, the rhythm of boots shuffling into place. Even silence becomes part of the pattern, stretched taut during chapel or mealtime, broken only by coughs or the occasional cry of a child. The monotony dulls your thoughts, but sharpens your awareness of these tiny consistencies. A patch of moss on the courtyard wall becomes a companion. The sound of the bell becomes almost melodic. The smell of broth, though thin, becomes something to anticipate simply because it interrupts the sameness of labor. In the absence of change, your mind clings to whatever fragments of difference it can find. There is, of course, an irony in all this. The workhouse was designed to strip life down to its most basic pattern: food, labor, rest, repeat. And it succeeds. The idea was never to make you comfortable, but to make poverty itself seem unbearable. Yet the body is adaptable, the mind even more so. What is meant as punishment becomes routine. What is meant as deterrent becomes rhythm. Lying in bed at night, you hear the same creaks of the same iron frames around you. You turn beneath the same rough blanket, staring at the same ceiling. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and the day after that. And strangely, you find yourself resigned. The monotony, oppressive at first, has folded itself around you like a second blanket. Still, even blankets can feel heavy. The rhythm, steady as it is, does not change the weight of the tasks themselves. The stones remain hard, the bread remains coarse, and your body remains tired. The bells will call again, and you will rise again, and the cycle will continue. Not every day in the workhouse is sealed entirely shut from the outside world. Occasionally, the gates creak open to allow in people who are not residents, not paupers, not staff. They arrive with clipboards or with stern hats. Or sometimes with a faint whiff of perfume that suggests they've come directly from breakfast in a more comfortable dining room. These are visitors, and their presence bends the rhythm of the day, though only slightly. Some visitors are inspectors' official men with serious coats and faces that look as if they've been carved from granite. They walk the wards, not touching anything, just looking. Their eyes darting from corner to corner as if dirt or disorder might leap out at them. They ask questions, but not of you. They direct them at the master or matron, who trail along like shadows. The inspectors sometimes sniff the air, as though trying to detect poverty by scent alone. They almost always frown, perhaps to prove that they are taking their role very seriously. Other visitors are charitable sorts, the kind who believe in improvement. They arrive with tracts, with Bibles, with a determined glow of benevolence. They speak to you as if you are a child in need of gentle correction, even if you are clearly twice their age. Some read aloud, some lead hymns, some distribute a small Tritan orange, perhaps, or a penny sweetmeat to remind you that kindness exists. Their visits are a mix of intrusion and novelty. You don't look forward to them exactly, but you also don't mind the slight disruption they cause in the endless sameness of the day. Children in the workhouse become accustomed to visitors most quickly. They learn to stand straighter, to recite little verses when prompted, to smile when the charitable lady asks them to. Adults are less adept at this choreography. Your own posture remains stiff, your answers short. It is hard to conjure enthusiasm when you know the visitor will leave in an hour. Stepping back into the open air with relief, while you return to the stone walls that will not release you. Inspections are the more unsettling of the two. They are not meant to comfort you, but to evaluate the machine of the workhouse itself. Beds are checked, floors are scrutinized, food is examined. The quality of your broth becomes a matter of record, though no one lingers long enough to actually taste it with any seriousness. Occasionally, an inspector might ask if you are treated fairly. But the question hangs in the air, like a rhetorical exercise. You know better than to answer with anything but yes. Sir, the walls have ears, and discipline is far more immediate than reform. Still, the presence of outsiders makes you see the workhouse with fresh eyes. You notice the peeling paint, the cracked tiles, the faint smell of boiled cabbage that clings to every corridor. You wonder what they notice? Do they see human beings or just statistics? Do they hear the coughs, the muffled sobs, the clatter of spoons and bowls? Or do those sounds dissolve into background noise? When the visitors depart, the gates shut again, and the workhouse exhales. The routine snaps back into place, as if nothing happened. The bells ring, the work resumes, the broth is ladled out. Yet for a few hours, perhaps even a full day, their presence lingers in your mind. You imagine the inspector at his dinner table, recounting his findings in a tidy report. You imagine the charitable lady sitting in her parlor, certain she has improved a soul today. And you imagine yourself still here, still repeating the same steps as before. The rhythm of the workhouse resumes its monotone hum, but the visit reminds you that a world exists beyond these walls. And in that reminder lies a faint restlessness, a tug towards something outside the pattern. It passes, of course, as fatigue settles back into your bones. The bell will ring again. You will answer it. But for now, the thought of visitors naturally shifts your mind to the one form of escape permitted in this place. Sleep. Not a grand departure, but a small reprieve where in the dormitory. The night takes its turn at shaping the rhythm of your life. Close your eyes for a moment. Not to sleep yet, but simply to listen. The workhouse has a soundscape all its own, as distinctive as any orchestra, though this orchestra is conducted by necessity rather than art. You never quite get silence here. Even in the dead of night, there is always a creak, a cough, or the distant drip of a pipe that insists on reminding you where you are. During the day, the sounds are relentless. Hammers striking stone in the yard carry a steady rhythm like a blacksmith's forge stripped of its warmth. The laundry steams with the slap of wet cloth against boards, punctuated by the hiss of boiling water. In the kitchen, knives scrape against wood, ladles bang against iron pots, and the heavy doors of the ovens groan, open and shut. Everywhere you turn, the air is alive with labor. It's not a cheerful hum of industry, but a blunt chorus of survival tools against stone. Fabric against wood, boots against flagstone floors, out voices thread through it all, though never in quite the way you'd hear in a marketplace or a tavern. Workhouse conversations are clipped, whispered, and carefully timed between the overseer's footsteps. The echoes in the great wards turn even the quietest cough into something communal. When one person clears their throat, you often hear a ripple of others doing the same, as though the air itself encourages mimicry. At meals, the clatter of spoons and the scrape of bowls fill the gaps where chatter might otherwise belong. Food is not accompanied by conversation here. It is devoured quickly, leaving only the sharp sound of hunger meeting tin. At night, the tone changes but never truly fades. The men's ward becomes a chamber of snores, wheezes, and muttered dreams. The cough of tuberculosis has a hollow echo that carries across rows of iron bedsteads, answered by the congested wheeze of another bed somewhere in the dark. Sometimes you wake to the sound of footsteps, official ones, firm and deliberate, belonging to a night watchman making his rounds. Other times you hear the softer shuffle of someone turning over, restless in sleep. There is no mistaking these sounds. They remind you, even in your half-dreams, that you are never alone. The building itself speaks too. Wood contracts with a groan. Iron frames complain beneath the weight of bodies. Stone corridors carry footsteps, so clear that you can guess who approaches before you see them. Fast strides for the master, slower, and more deliberate for the matron, shuffling for a fellow inmate weighed down by fatigue. The workhouse is always talking, even if the language is creaks, clangs, and echoes. Perhaps the strangest thing is how quickly these sounds stop feeling intrusive. After weeks, they become your background, as ordinary as birdsong is to someone living in the countryside. You stop noticing the drip of the pipe until it changes rhythm. You stop noticing the clang of the bell until one day it rings late, and the absence feels louder than the sound itself. In time, you realize the sounds of the workhouse are not just noise, they are its pulse. It's living proof that the place never truly sleeps. It is within this unending soundscape that your own body finds its cues. You rise with the bell, eat with the scrape of spoons, sleep to the lull of snores. The noises are not pleasant, but they are dependable. In a world stripped of comfort, dependability is a strange sort of mercy. And when you think of mercy, your mind drifts naturally toward the few scraps of diversion. The workhouse allows moments when sound shifts into something unexpected, perhaps even musical, which leads neatly into the next part of your experience, the small amusements, entertainments, and diversions that flicker like sparks in the long monotony. Nightfall in the workhouse does not arrive with any sense of luxury. There is no warm glow of lamplight, no cheerful chatter around a hearth, no soft bedding awaiting your weary body. Instead, evening settles with the same bluntness as the day. The bell sounds. The doors are bolted and the great dormitories begin to fill with their inhabitants, each filing to their place like pieces of a puzzle slotted into rows. You shuffle into the dormitory with the others, the floorboards flexing under the press of so many boots. The air is close, thick with the lingering smell of boiled cabbage and the damp wool of coats that have not fully dried. Above it all hangs the sharper tang of iron rising from the beds themselves, metal frames lined in strict formation, each with its thin mattress of straw. The mattresses are never generous. They sag quickly, and the straw within crunches faintly as you lower yourself down. A sound that manages to be both intimate and impersonal at once. The transition into night is marked by the extinguishing of lamps, one by one, until the dormitory is left in a darkness broken only by the glow of moonlight through high barred windows. That light is more symbolic than practical. It reveals little, but reminds you that a world exists outside, one you cannot step into. Within the ward, shadows stretch long and uncertain. The distance between beds feels smaller in the dark, though you know each is set apart with exacting order. It doesn't take long before the sounds of night begin their chorus. First comes the coughing, a single one, tentative, quickly followed by another across the room. Soon the air is punctuated with wheezes, rattles, and clearing throats, as though every chest has decided to contribute to the same symphony. Then the snores begin. Some are soft, almost a purr, while others are explosive bursts that rattle the bed frames. Occasionally, someone mutters in their sleep, and the words drift, half-formed through the darkness, too quiet to understand, yet strangely humanizing in this regimented place. Lying there, you feel the rough weave of the blanket against your skin, scratchy and thin enough that the night air creeps through it. Winter nights are cruel. Your toes curl against the cold, and you tuck your knees closer to your chest. Summer brings a different discomfort, the heat trapped by so many bodies packed into one room, the blanket suddenly too heavy. Either way, rest is not exactly restful here. It is more like a truce with fatigue. Do not sleep because you are comfortable, but because exhaustion insists upon it. There are moments, as you drift in and out, when you imagine what others are dreaming. The child down the row, perhaps dreaming of a loaf of bread, too big to finish. The old man whose breath whistles through broken teeth, maybe wandering through memories of a street corner or a pub long gone. The woman across the yard, in her own ward, likely lies awake, counting the cracks in the ceiling above her. Dreams in the workhouse are one of the few freedoms that remain untouched. Occasionally, footsteps interrupt the night. A watchman makes his round. His boots deliberate on the stone floor. The sound grows louder, then fades, swallowed by the snores and coughs. You never see him clearly. Just sense his presence moving through the darkness like a reminder that even in sleep, you are never unwatched. The door creaks, the hinges groan, and then you are left again with the endless soundscape of restless sleep. Nightfall does not erase the workhouse. It merely softens its edges. The same discipline, the same separation, the same hunger, all carry forward into the hours of darkness. Yet the stillness of night is perhaps the only time you feel a flicker of individuality. Lying on your narrow bed, wrapped in thin wool, you are not a worker, not a ward, not an inmate. You are simply tired, simply human. And that recognition, small though it is, carries you toward sleep. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you realize that night is less an escape than a pause. The bell will come again at dawn. The rhythm will resume. But for these few hours, in the muffled chorus of coughs and dreams, the workhouse exhales, and you with it. If the workhouse feels heavy on the inside, it carries a weight outside, to a weight you may never be able to shrug off. For even beyond its walls, the very word workhouse clings to you like soot in your clothing. To enter here is not simply to seek food or shelter. It is to take on a mark, an invisible brand that announces poverty in a society deeply suspicious of it. You sense this stigma the moment you first cross the threshold, but it becomes sharper whenever your mind drifts to the world outside. Neighbors talk. Shopkeepers remember. Children at play whisper to each other when someone as father or mother is known to have gone into the house. The workhouse is not seen as refuge, but as shame. To be here is to confirm what others already suspected, that you could not manage, that you had failed to stand on your own. It is a harsh judgment, but a common one. Victorian society prides itself on industry, on self-reliance, on the image of upward striving. The workhouse is the opposite of all that. It is dependence in its most visible form. Even though you labor long hours within these walls, even though you rise and fall to the bell like any soldier or clerk, the world outside sees none of this. It sees only the entrance you made at the gate. And once your name has been tied to this place, people are unlikely to let it go. You think about what it would mean to leave. Suppose you were discharged tomorrow, your clothes returned, your steps, once again free to wander the city streets. Would things feel different? Perhaps a little. The fresh air would not be rationed. The sounds would be of carts and horses rather than bells and coughs. But the eyes of others would follow you. To some, you would remain a workhouse man or workhouse woman, as though the building itself had swallowed your identity and given you back only a label. Even children who grow up inside feel it. When placed out as apprentices, they carry the workhouse with them, not in their hands, but in the way people glance at them, expect less of them, or laugh when they stumble. The building leaves no visible scar, yet society reads one on your skin nonetheless. And yet, curiously, inside the workhouse walls, stigma fades in a different way. Here everyone is marked, and so the mark itself becomes ordinary. Within the wards, you are not singled out. You are part of a crowd that shares the same fate. It is only when you imagine stepping outside that the shame curls back into your thoughts. The stigma is deliberate, of course. The system was designed that way. The workhouse was meant not only to feed and house the poor, but also to discourage anyone from ever wanting to enter. It is poverty made visible, poverty made official. The shame is as much a tool of deterrence as the coarse bread and the hard labor. But as you lie in your narrow bed, listening to the snores and coughs of your companions, You realize that stigma does not feed you, and it does not keep you warm. It is only another weight to carry. And like all weights, you learn slowly, stubbornly, to shift it, to live with it, and, when you can, to set it down, if only for a few hours of restless sleep. The burden of shame naturally leads your thoughts to what endures beyond these walls, not just the stigma, but the memory of resilience, the threads of legacy that linger long after the gates have closed behind you. For all its harshness, the workhouse is not entirely stripped of tenderness. Human beings, after all, are stubbornly inventive when it comes to carving out scraps of comfort. Within these rigid walls, where rules are designed to flatten individuality, you still find moments, small mercies, fleeting bonds that stitch the days together in ways the overseers never intended. It might be as simple as someone sliding the slightly thicker slice of bread toward you at supper, a silent gesture that costs nothing but feels oddly generous. Or the woman at the laundry who, though her hands are red and raw from soap and steam, hums a tune under her breath. The melody is too quiet to be called music, yet it threads through the workroom like a ribbon, making the air less heavy for a few minutes. Even the shared joke, whispered quickly before the matron appears, becomes its own kind of rebellion. A quip about watery gruel, a dry comment about the ever-ringing bell, a grin half hidden behind a ladle. These things remind you that dignity has not been entirely boiled away. Children, especially, make space for mercy. They share crusts, pass on a small treasure, a button, a feather, a smooth stone, as if such things are jewels. Their laughter is rare but startlingly bright, bursting out in the yard when a game of tag briefly outruns the gaze of the overseer. You catch yourself smiling at it, even though smiles are not officially on the schedule. Illness, too, creates its own kind of solidarity. In the infirmary, where beds are lined up as neatly as in the wards, patients whisper encouragements to one another. Someone pours water into your tin cup when your hands shake. Someone else folds your blanket higher on your chest. These gestures are not grand, but they are steady, and in a place that measures life and sameness, steadiness is gold. Even the act of listening can feel like mercy. When someone tells you a memory of a field, of a lost sibling, of a street corner where a brass band once played, you nod, not because you can change anything, but because their words deserve to land somewhere. That is enough, to hold someone's memory with care, and to know they might do the same for you. You begin to notice that these bonds are not accidental. They are survival. The workhouse is designed to reduce, to isolate, to wear people down into silent endurance. But endurance is easier in company. A scrap of kindness becomes fuel. Shared laugh becomes a kind of oxygen. And so, despite the rules, despite the discipline, despite the intention to erase individuality, the people here make room for humanity anyway. When you settle into your narrow bed at night, surrounded by coughs and snores, you think less of the cold blanket and more of the small warmth gathered through the day. The nod from a fellow inmate, the whispered joke. The song half heard over the clatter of dishes, all of it clings more tightly than the rules ever could. And in those bonds lies a quiet reminder. Even here, in the most regimented of places, humanity endures. It may be hushed, it may be rationed, but it is not extinguished. From these fragile mercies, your thoughts naturally turn toward the larger story, how the workhouse, despite its intentions, left behind not only scars, but also lessons, memories, and the faint thread of resilience that survives into the present. Time in the workhouse does not flow as it does outside. It does not skip or race or surprise you. Instead, it drags its feet like a weary old man shuffling along the corridor with no particular urgency. Days here are measured not by clocks or calendars, but by repetition, by the clang of bells, the scrape of bowls, the rhythm of work, work, and rest, until one day feels like the faint echo of another. You wake to the same gray light filtering through high windows, always muted, as though even the sun has been rationed. You hear the same coughs in the ward, the same clatter of tin bowls, the same weary shuffle to labor. If you tried to distinguish one Tuesday from the next, you'd struggle. Even Sundays, marked by chapel services, blur into each other until hymns themselves feel like extensions of the same chant. The sameness is numbing, and yet it is also strangely hypnotic. At first, this monotony gnaws at you. Each day stretches endlessly, the hours crawling like ants across a table. You count the moments until mealtimes, then find those moments disappointingly small and thin. You look for anything, a crack in the plaster, a bird landing on the courtyard wall that might suggest movement in time. But slowly, as weeks trickle into months, you stop trying to measure time at all. You surrender to its sluggish pace, letting it wash over you like a tide that never changes. The human mind, however, resists total surrender, begins to create small markers where none exist. You start to note the angle of the light at midday, the way it shifts ever so slightly with the seasons. You listen for subtle changes in routine, a new overseer's footsteps, a different ladle in the kitchen, the cough of one neighbor that eventually falls silent. Time here is not measured in hours, but in absences and arrivals, in the slow wearing away of things. The children, perhaps, feel time most sharply. They grow taller, their voices shifting, their faces losing roundness. Adults remain much the same, but the children transform quietly in the background, living calendars in human form. You realize how many days must have passed only when a boy suddenly looks you in the eye instead of up at you. There are, of course, rare moments when time quickens. An inspection, a visitor. An illness that sweeps through the wards. These events create small jolts, as though the monotony has been interrupted by a pebble tossed into still water. Yet even these ripples flatten quickly, leaving the pond smooth once more. The workhouse is designed to erase drama, to subdue surprise, to return everything to the long, slow crawl. You find yourself thinking differently about time altogether. Outside, people might speak of wasted years or lost opportunities. Inside, time is neither wasted nor gained. It simply is. A gray presence, steady and indifferent, like the stone walls around you. You stop asking what you might do with time, because in here, time does what it pleases with you. And yet, there is something oddly stabilizing in this slow flow. Life outside can be frantic, unpredictable, but here, you are never startled by change. You know what tomorrow will bring. You know when the bell will ring, what the bread will be passed. Time may be heavy, but at least it is steady. As you lie in your bed, staring at the ceiling through the haze of lantern light, you realize that years could pass this way, and the place would barely notice. The walls will endure. The schedule will repeat. Only the faces will shift, slowly, quietly, like the ticking of a clock muffled behind layers of cloth. And it is in thinking about that endurance, the way the workhouse outlasts those within it, that your mind turns naturally toward its legacy, and how memory of such places has shaped the world beyond their walls. And so, with the workhouse fading behind you, its bells silenced, and its corridors finally quiet, you drift away from the long days and the slow-passing years, the stone walls, the endless bowls of gruel. The scratch, of course, blanket Saul of it slips into the background, becoming no more than a memory of endurance. What remains is not just hardship, but also the strange calm of routine, the small mercies shared, and the reminder of how people, even in the most rigid systems, find ways to be human. So now, as you settle deeper into your own bed, free from the drafty halls and the clanging bells, you can let your breath soften, your body grow heavier, your thoughts wander gently into dreams. Because history is still here, waiting, but for tonight, you've done enough. You've walked the wards, heard the echoes, and felt the weight of time. Now you can rest. Good night.